Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. We're starting off our new year right this weekend. We're waking up with watches and everything is for sale. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for all of your purchase and pricing inquiries. And we buy what we sell what we buy. The holidays may be over, but we always need inventory. Trade us a watch you don't wear for when you will, or sell us a watch or sell us an entire collection. No upper limit on value paid. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make the process a no-brainer and walk you through to buy, trade, or sell. Check me out. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. So, the Omega Silver Snoopy 3 is a timepiece that represents Omega at its best. It references its history, and the history is authentic, but it's also fun, even a little bit whimsical. So, of course, the original Silver Snoopy came out in the early 2000s, and it celebrated the Silver Snoopy Award that was given to Omega by the surviving Apollo 13 crew. So October 5th, 1970 is when the three crew members of Apollo 13 recognized Omega for the role that the Omega Speedmaster Chronograph played in recovering the damaged Apollo 13 command module. And so this is an award given by the astronauts to valued contractors or employees of NASA, and that's exactly what we have right here. Now, of course, we also have quite a bit of whimsy. The watch features a perpetually spinning Earth, and that operates on the same axis as the running seconds display. There's also a little orbiting command module featuring Snoopy in his World War I air combat guise as he hunts the Red Baron. That is only in operation as long as the chronograph's running. You can see it has a little sapphire swing arm on which it rotates. We have the surface of the moon right here, and it's a very photorealistic looking moon. Inside caliber 3861, the latest free-sprung, coaxial, master chronometer certified LeMania-based Moonwatch caliber. And you'll note what I can do here. I can pull the crown out. It stops everything. This is the first Moonwatch caliber to have hacking seconds. And, of course, you can see April 1970. That's when Apollo 13 had its brush with death. 50-hour power reserve, manual wind on the dial side. It is a bit of a sapphire sandwich, as we have sapphire on the back and sapphire over the dial. Ceramic tachymeter track. Let's take a quick look at the lume on this watch. It is a standard 42mm steel Moonwatch. But what's not standard is the use of applique indices, the Silver Snoopy graphic, and this is a design created for the award by Peanuts comics creator Schultz. Charles Schultz designed this, and of course he drew a version of Snoopy with a little briefcase and a spacesuit. And so, very important because this was specifically created in anticipation of the award being given out at a later date on a regular basis. So this version of Snoopy is NASA's own version of Snoopy. And you can see 50 years since the recovery of Apollo 13. This model came out in 2020. And if you look very carefully, you can see AG 925. This is a sterling silver Snoopy dial. So it's a sort of blue panda with sterling silver. And a very special watch. You can see the strap matches the watch, combination of a contrasting white stitch. We have a gusset sewn in to prevent gouging of the textile, and then on the bottom we have calfskin. You can see this little diagram of the orbit around the far side of the moon, little command module, and it's sort of used the gravity of the moon to slingshot back into Earth orbit and ultimately recovery. You can see that the buckle is standard Omega fare, but it is appropriate to a sports watch. It allows quick on-the-fly adjustments. Big watch, that's been the case with the Moonwatch since the beginning. I imagine these 42mm timepieces must have seemed like monsters in the late 60s, but you can see how it wears on the wrist. It's about 48.5 millimeters from lug to lug, and my wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. A very different take on that is, well, a full bracelet sports chronograph. Taking a look here, we've got the Girard-Perregaux Laureato Chronograph Aston Martin edition. Now, they made 188 of these. This is a limited edition, and these came out back in 2021. Aston Martin Racing Green dial. It's not quite British Racing Green. It's more like a metallic green with some undertones of blue. If you've seen Aston Martin's race cars from the 1950s, especially the one that won Le Mans in 1959 with Carroll Shelby and Roy Salvadori, you know exactly where this green comes from. There's also an attractive cross attaching on the dial, and it is well loomed. It's a true sports watch. It's 100 meters, water resistant, full steel, full bracelet, automatic winding, and well loomed. We have this distinctive Laureato bezel, and while you might say, oh, this is a Johnny-come-lately to the integrated bracelet sports watch class, think again. The original Laureato with its integrated case and bracelet came out in 1975, the heyday of the style, and of course before the Vacheron 222, the IWC Ingenieur SL, and the Patek Philippe Nautilus. Now we've got a little crown that echoes the shape of the bezel, and so the watch does have a number of useful features. We've got hacking seconds, we've got a quick set date with a lovely open 6 font used. We've got a chronograph that features screw-down crowns. Remember, 100 meters of water resistance here. It is a vertical clutch chronograph module. It is a modular chronograph, and yet the watch is only 12.4 millimeters thick, despite the modular assembly. You can see how smooth the vertical clutch engagement of the chronograph is. And Aston Martin cars, represented by the famed winged logo. You can see it ghosted onto the reverse side. Girard-Perregaux is the current horological partner of Aston Martin. And you can see underneath we have a 300 base. Now this is a GP manufacture movement. You can see from this angle that anglage on the rotor and the bridges. I'm trying to get the camera to focus, but anglage on the rotor and the bridges is very impressive. So is the circular Côte de Genève, and then we have engine turning on the edge of the bridges as well as the base plate. It's a unidirectional winder with a 4 Hz beat rate and a 46-hour power reserve, and you can see it as a micrometric adjustment mechanism on top of the balance. A really cool watch. The canted edges of the case mitigate some of the fit issues on smaller wrists. And fun fact, this is one of the few watches not made by Rolex that uses the exceptionally corrosion-resistant 904L steel. So you can see it actually matches my sleeve almost perfect, and it would slide under my sleeve. Well, it's definitely a sports chronograph. It's also something you could wear in formal attire. It's very, very versatile, and it's a fantastic candidate to be your only watch. Sticking with the integrated bracelet theme, in 2021, Romain Gauthier came out with the Continuum, and in 2022 came out with this. This is the Romain Gauthier C, based on the Continuum, but now with the company's first ever integrated bracelet. Everything you see is titanium. The bracelet, the dial, even the movement construction. So you can see the watch is fairly well loomed. We'll do a loom shot right here. Take note, no shortage, and all 3 hands loomed. It's got one refinement that a lot of high-end independents skip for some reason, and that refinement is hacking seconds. So you can set the watch to a reference time. It's 41 millimeters in diameter. It's 9.5 thick as I measure it. You can see that the crown is off-centered to make it ambidextrous, and it does feel very, very light on the wrist. It's almost like a second skin. Now, this watch is big. It's a 41. I recommend you consider it a 42 or a 43 for fit purposes, but it will slide right underneath any kind of cuff. Let's try to get a little bit closer now. I'll do my best to avoid corruption of the image. I don't have complete control over the focus on this camera. The movement is exceptional. You can see Gauthier's sort of recursive circle-in-circle wheel design. The bridges are elaborate, beveled on their side, though not to a mirrored shine. They're filed, but not to Baroque standards. It's the satin channels along the edge and the chiseling inside the hollows of the bridges that really stand out. And of course, this movement is also made of titanium. It has hacking seconds. It has a 60 to 65 hour power reserve. It is free sprung for durability. It is a complete manufacture product and deeply impressive in that regard. Of course, maybe there's a little bit too much text on it, but you can overlook that. This is a beautiful watch of exceptional rarity and exclusivity, and it is one of the best takes on the integrated bracelet sports watch genre that I've seen. Do I think this is the most audacious or opulent Romain Gauthier? No. But when compared to something like a Vacheron Overseas, a Patek Philippe 5811, a Chapek Antarctique, this is completely competitive. And in some regards, it even steps beyond what those have accomplished, particularly with the triple titanium case and bracelet, dial, and movement construction. You can also see how much depth this dial actually has as we have applied solid blocks of loom on the dial itself, a really cool and subtle effect. I would never write off watches made by luxury group brands. We say bad things about the Breguets, the Blancpains, the Glasuta Original, the Vacherons, the Piaget, the Baume & Mercier, the JLCs, IWCs, and Panerai of the world. But the fact is, I think we've gone from a period where these were maybe over-touted by their parent companies to the point where there's now so much independent brand snobbery that major luxury group products are actually underrated. They're a lot better than you think. In many cases, they're a lot better than what the indies are offering. Blancpain, back in 2019, launched this 500-piece limited edition based on a historic model that was made for the German military and civilian market by a company called Barakuda. Barakuda branded them as a sort of subcontractor so that a Swiss brand could get a German military contract. The Barakuda design you see right here is based on the 5008 reference, which means in steel. This is the 40.3 millimeter 50 fathoms, a timepiece that is perfectly sized and historically evocative in both its size and its details. There is no shortage of luminescence. In spite of the use of a sort of photina, it's no dull bulb when the lights go out. This is a bright watch, both figuratively and literally. Note that because the bezel is sapphire capped, it can be completely loomed all the way around with no danger of the loom being scraped off. All three hands are loomed. This should be standard on every dive watch, as you need to know that your dive timer is running in the dark. The watch has a spectacularly compact case that's super flat and easily wears on any wrist. Taking a quick look on my wrist, you can see just how compact it is. This is the ultimate 50 fathoms for a man or a woman who has a taste for tradition and timeless elegance. It will fit under a cuff of any kind, whether a shirt or a jacket, and you can see just how short it is across the wrist in this down the barrel shot. Historically, 50 fathoms were not 45 millimeter watches, so this is also true to history. Flip it over, and, well, we respect history, but in terms of finishing quality and tech, the good old days are right now. This is caliber 1151, Frédéric Piguet for Blancpain. Remember, Frédéric Piguet is manufacturer Blancpain. They are completely integrated. 2 barrels, 100-hour power reserve, free sprung balance for durability. You can see it has been adjusted in 6 positions, 1 more than a standard chronometer. It has a recessed bolt aerodynamic balance, where all the timing adjustments are done by moving the variable inertia bolts in and out. That has an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, all this water resistant down to 300 meters. We have this lovely vintage-inspired tropic evocative strap, a really cool piece, and one of the best of the modern era. A lot of people ask me, Tim, when are we going to get a 40 millimeter version of the 50 fathoms? Guys, it's here. First come, first served. Every once in a while, a company does something that is so inspired that even though historically driven, it stands on its own 4 lugs. There's no question that the original Vacheron 6087 Corne de Vache chronograph of 1955 is one of the all-time greats. But the impressive thing about Vacheron Historiques models based on historic references is that they have a habit of becoming classics in their own right. And so here we have a platinum version of the modern day Corne de Vache, the reference 5000, and it's 38.5 millimeters, which is bigger than the original, but still fairly compact, giving it a strong vintage overtone. The dial features a tachymeter printed onto the dial, which is always a vintage inflection. We have these lovely rolled and vaulted baton-style hands, sunken sub-registers for the running seconds and the chronograph minutes. We may as well fire this up. And then we have applied white gold Roman numerals, Vacheron logo, and stick indices. Corne de Vache, or the horns of a cow. And that is the design of the lugs, which you can see are remarkable in their integration, as these were created separately from the case, welded on, and then by hand, excruciatingly slow removal of the gathered material of the weld. You know how welds often look like a fat caterpillar? Well, not here. Those welds have been removed to create a super sharp break between lug and case, something that can only be done slow and manually, which is why it's rarely done in the watch industry. But a watch like this, to be made in limited volumes, is a perfect candidate for that kind of slow, steady, and traditional fabrication. Now on the back, You can see we have caliber 1142. It's based on the Lemania 2310, which Vacheron still uses, albeit in modified form. Modifications include 5-position chronometer style adjustment, Geneva hallmark standard finish, a free-sprung balance, and an overcoil hairspring. It also has a 3 Hz beat rate, so 6 beats per second rather than the standard Lemania's 5 beats per second. We have a lateral clutch and a column wheel. Note that the column wheel has a little Maltese cross at its center. Feel and sound of chronograph action here are outstanding. And the reset, which features the dropping of the hammers on the hard cams, super sharp, super slick, and a watch that will well on any wrist. It'll wear well on a man's wrist, a lady's wrist. It is bigger than the original, so it doesn't seem unduly petite or undersized, but it's got a nice presence, a low profile. It fits underneath the cuff like any dress Vacheron should, and no one does dress watches like Vacheron does. I don't know, maybe I need to bite my tongue because then this shows up. In 2018, Lange und Söhne proved that you don't need to buy a high complication, a dotograph, a Lange 1, or a Zeitwerk to get a watch that represents the heart and soul of the East German brand. With the Saxonia thin copper blue, the company created possibly the most beautiful two-hand watch in the world, and one that, in my opinion, puts a certain blue-dialed chronometer back on the shelf. This thing, white gold at 39 millimeters, is razor thin, but it has the characteristic combination of a domed bezel, sheer case flank, and a stepped lug that we expect from a Lange. The dial, a venturine glass, a sort of vitreous paint, hard-fired in a kiln with a translucent quality that allows small metallic flakes to shine through the translucent material. It's done on a solid gold dial base, and you can see that the hands as well as the indices are solid gold with a lovely vaulted Lange und Söhne signature up at the top. We have alpha hands at center. And on the back side, we have a movement that includes, in miniature, most of the features that we associate with modern German watch finishing, which are, in turn, standards generally established by Lange itself, which created the vernacular of modern German watch movement finish. Taking a quick look, we have spectacular solarization on the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel, black polished click spring and click, 3/4 style bridge, pivot jewels set in golden chaton cups fixed by screws. We have polished screws, we have blued screws, we have a 3/4 bridge and a base plate made out of German silver, a nickel copper zinc alloy. We have a black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism, anglage on the edge of each bridge. Take a good look, you can see the edge of the ratchet wheel and the crown wheel. The teeth actually feature micro beveling on their profiles, freehand engraving on the balance cock, and impressively for such a compact movement, 3 days of power reserve. Again, this is very much a unisex watch. Most wrist sizes will wear it. Most wrists will appreciate it, and everyone who sees it will love it, whether they're watch people or not. It's amazing to think that you can buy these at or just below their retail price. That's proof that the watch market of today has puzzling priorities, because I know, and if you're watching this, you know just how special this watch is. Believe it or not, this is the penultimate watch in today's program, which is saying something because I always reserve what I believe to be the most spectacular timepiece for the final presentation. If this is only second best, what could possibly follow? Because I was at SIHH in 2017 when the MB&F HM7 Aquapod debuted. Every single person who sat for Harris's press conference declared this to be best in show, and they weren't wrong. It's huge. It's a dive style watch that can be surface swimmed, and I did ask them about that, but for the most part, it's designed to evoke marine imagery. Think dive watches, think jellyfish, Portuguese man of war. You have a central flying tourbillon, exquisitely hand-finished, incorporating MB&F's double-sided battle axe motif. We have here a scrolling time display, so concentric scales that move at 2 different rates. So right now you're looking at 2:30, now 2:35, now you are looking at 3 o'clock on the nose. And then you set it with one crown, and then you wind it with another crown, even though on the bottom it has a winding mass, which, by the way, is constructed of platinum. It's designed to represent the tendrils or the tentacles of a Portuguese man of war, and then you can see gold gilding on the movement underneath. Despite the power-intensive complication, it is a 3-day power reserve. The case is made of titanium, and it's one of 50. You can see that the lugs are double articulated to improve ergonomics, so don't be afraid of the diameter, which is 53.5 millimeters. Remember, that incorporates this large orbiting bezel, so it wears considerably smaller, though it is quite thick at about 18 millimeters. It's got a proprietary rubber strap, so you're good to go in terms of moisture, a GNF Chatelain double leaf spring titanium clasp that will keep it secure on your wrist. Once again, the MB&F battle axe motif. This watch has loom to light a room. You would not believe the loom of this watch, and it's an absolute circus to play with the time scale in the dark. Super cool stuff. This was actually a 2018 update of the HM7 Aquapod with the green accents and titanium construction. You can see on my wrist that the feet of the watch, and I'm going to call them feet rather than lugs, they brace on a small wrist and allow the watch to wear compact and comfortable. Even on a wrist, believe it or not, as small as 14 centimeters circumference. This is MB&F at its best, and along with the HM4 Thunderbolt, this is probably co-equally my favorite horological machine from Max. So what could possibly be more intense than that? How about a watch with 771 pieces in its movement? That's more than some grand complications. At 44.2 millimeters and launched in 2005, we have the Lange und Söhne Zeitwerk minute repeater. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this watch up for a big jump, and we will watch the big jump, and then we will fire up the repeater function. Okay, so what do you need to know here? Well, first, this is not the initial chiming Zeitwerk. That would have been the rather limited but still amusing Zeitwerk striking of 2011. This is a decimal repeater, which means it chimes the hours, the tens of minutes after the hour, and then the number of minutes after the last tens. So here you can see we're moving towards the jump of the watch. This time bridge is actually part of the movement visible on the dial side. There we go. And you can see that the strikers are black polished. Now, if you want to quickly spot the difference between a Zeitwerk striking and the minute repeater, the chimes run outside the hammers on the striking, and you don't have this little red dot indicating the lowest threshold of mainspring wind at which the repeater can be activated. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to advance back to 12:59, which will give us the biggest strike. So you will get 12 hours, 5 sets of 10 minutes, and then you will get, ideally, 9 minutes after 12:50. So we're going to go all the way back. You can see how the quickset works. Note that we do have hacking seconds on this watch. The dial's made of sterling silver with the exception of the time bridge, which is made of German silver, a alloy of nickel, copper, and zinc. The finish is outstanding, and if you look at the little pivot adjacent to the 2 minute displays, that's actually a pivot jewel on which the 2 minute discs rotate. You can also see the strikers are both impressively black polished on their tops and beveled along their edges, including sharp outward points where bevels converge. And this is an interesting watch because rather than requesting that you pull some sort of repeater slide or press a charging lever, this doesn't risk a half-pulled slide or a half-pushed lever. This uses a system that drives off the mainspring barrel, so as soon as you activate the repeater, there's enough energy every single time to operate the chimes in full, doing away with one of the great hazards of the minute repeater dating back to the 18th century, which was a partial charging of the repeater slide. So now, Notice how it doesn't jump until it's finished chiming. To protect the mechanism, Lange built a display delay into the system. Now, on a conventional minute repeater, you're not supposed to set the time while chiming or chime the time while setting. And by delaying the jump of the hour and the minutes until after the chimes, Lange ensures that the watch itself is smart enough to take this precaution. Now, you can see this is massively built in platinum. On the reverse side, we have a constant force device, a remontoir d'égalité with a time bridge mechanism. It has an aerodynamic brake to slow down the energy as it's transferred through a locking lever. There are two third wheels. Sandwiched between them, there's a hairspring. The upper third wheel gets energized once a minute when this locking lever unlocks, and then the hairspring transitions the energy from the upper third wheel to the lower third wheel, which then drives the escapement itself. So the energy for the escapement is being topped up every minute to ensure that there is a minimal fluctuation in balance amplitude. It has an overcoil hairspring, a free-sprung architecture, two freehand engraved structures. Look at the solarization on the barrel. And I mean, frankly, this is eye-watering finish at every step. Technically and artistically, this is as good as watchmaking gets. It is big, no doubt, it is big. And on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters circumference, it pushes right out to the edge. That said, I would wear it. And you could see over the top, which exaggerates the width of the watch, the lugs are not out over the edge of my wrist. You could see down the barrel, too, that they're to the edge, but not over the edge. And all things considered, it's actually a pretty thin watch. Reach out if you love this watch or any of the watches you've just seen. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.